Hello, hello, and welcome to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. I'm your host, Nick Berlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and it is August, the slowest month in the National Hockey League calendar, but we have made it to this point, and you can't get through to the dawn without getting through the dark ages. And August is, for NHL calendar purposes, is the dark ages, but at the very least, we know, Horwat, that legends are born on this week in history. Happy belated birthday to Evgeny Malkin, who turned 36 years old yesterday on Sunday. And happy early birthday to Sidney Crosby, who will be turning 35 next Sunday. So a week apart, two legends of the Pittsburgh Penguins, two birthdays to celebrate. And other than that, at least we have World Juniors coming up, which is not normal. That's going to be a nice little island in the middle of this desert of no hockey in August.
Yeah, but you know what? One thing about the World Juniors, though, it has no implications for the Penguins whatsoever, right?
Not as of lately, no.
Okay, so that'll just be more baseball for me to watch, I guess. More watching the Red Sox not know how to play the game. More of watching the Pirates not know how to play the game. And yeah, you know what? August is a boring month. And in general, it's a boring month. It's like the one month that doesn't have a national holiday in it or like a big celebration in it. It's kind of just the ramp up to here comes fall, autumn, whatever you want to call it. And it's going to be hot. It's going to be
preseason football doesn't do it for you?
No. And the football news that just came out today is only making things worse.
Yeah, that's very true. We won't get into that. But nonetheless, when it comes to Penguins prospects, although you might not be able to see many of them, if any of them play at the World Juniors that takes place between August 9th and August 20th, you will see plenty of Pittsburgh Penguins prospects at the Prospect Challenge in September. Rookie camp for the Pittsburgh Penguins is slated between September 15th and 20th with a prospects game against the Boston Bruins on September 17th at 3:30 p.m. This, of course, announced late last week by the Pittsburgh Penguins. So you'll get to see some of the young talent in the Penguins organization hit the ice between the 15th and the 20th in, I believe, the rookie camp will be in Pittsburgh, but that prospects game against the Bruins will be in Buffalo.
Yes. Yeah. Because they host the tournament up there. It's us, Buffalo. We play Boston. I believe Montreal, Ottawa, and Detroit are involved as well. I think it's just those 6 teams. It's weird that we're involved with only playing one game, so I really don't know how this breaks down. I haven't looked into full details, and not that I don't care that much, but if we're only playing one game, I will tune in and look at a roster for one game, look at a box score, and make conclusions.
Luckily, I believe, I know Taylor Haas of DK Pittsburgh Sports said it might be aired on the YouTube channel or streamed somewhere. So you will be able to watch it. So you will get some Penguins hockey in the middle of September, but that is still a month and a half away.
That's still a while. And it's not even the big dogs. It's the guys that might make something of themselves one day. And that is fun to watch. What was the date again? September what?
The game is on September 17th, but the rookie camp starts on the 15th and runs through the 20th.
All right. Well, we have a month and a half. And then regular camp opens up directly after, which is really nice.
Exactly. We'll talk about regular camp in a second, but before we get to that, while we're talking about Pittsburgh Penguins prospects, I know we've talked ad nauseum about the ones that are trying to make the jump this year to the NHL, a la P.O. Joseph, a la Valtteri Puustinen. But I want to ask you, besides those guys, the guys that we're expecting to see at some point this season, whether it be for one game, a handful of games, or maybe even making a regular spot in the National Hockey League, which other prospect are you most excited to watch? Maybe in mid-September, they might be part of that prospect challenge. They might be part of that rookie camp. But which prospects are you most excited to see this upcoming season, especially in training camp and in rookie camp earlier in September?
I'm going to lay my hat in the ring of a guy like Sam Poulin, just because it's a make or break year for him, it feels, doesn't it? It feels like this has got to be it. Something has to give, almost like P.O. Joseph, except P.O. Joseph, if he doesn't play this year, it could be a career thing. Whereas Poulin, he could probably still find a new home somewhere. if need be. He's still young. He still has his opportunities, but it just seems like he needs to really take the next step this year, whether it be just a game or 2 or 3 or 4. He has to take that next step this year. I'm excited to see what he can do in the process leading up to getting those NHL games in and seeing where he's at in his progress, in his growing into the NHL. I just want to see where he is because, well, yeah, we have AHL statistics and numbers. I don't pay that close of attention to it. I don't see really what's happening. I just want to see what's happening and how he's doing and see what people are saying about it. So I'll be keeping an eye on him. He's supposed to be a top 4 prospect for us.
Yeah, and I agree with that. He's actually on my list as well. I want to see what Poulin looks like after what happened to him last season. Really poor start in his first year in professional hockey playing for the AHL's Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. And then something clicked about halfway through the season, and you started to see more along the lines of what was expected from Sam Poulin and more along the lines of what is expected for a first-round draft pick, albeit at the 21st overall selection. So I'm excited to see what growth he has taken in the offseason and see where he starts at the beginning of this season, considering how well he finished off last season with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins.
Yeah, that'll be exciting to see. Hopefully he could pick up where he left off and become a new sort of player and maybe be a threat for this team.
Another player I wanted to mention, and he is also on the forward side, is Lukas Svejkovsky. He's a 4th-round draft pick of the Pittsburgh Penguins back in the 2020 NHL entry draft. He had a really good development camp back in June. A lot of people were mentioning how quick he is, how good his hands are. He has nice scoring ability and a nice instinct for scoring on the ice, and that's great, obviously, for a poor prospect. You'd like to see it. But a lot of people were mentioning that he was a highlight player in that camp. So I'm excited to see a little bit more of him, because he is expected to play with Wilkes-Barre next season, similar to what we said with Poulin last year. He's making that jump to professional hockey. We'll see what he does against men. We'll see what he does in that secondary league of the AHL. We're not going to see him in Pittsburgh. I'll say this right now. You're not going to see him in Pittsburgh this year. Probably not next year. You might see him a little bit next year, but the year after, that's when you really kind of have to look at his prospectus as to when he's expected to be an impact player in the NHL, or at least make the NHL. But I'm excited to see the jump that he takes this year. If you look at last season in the WHL, he had 76 points, including 35 goals in 56 games played between 2 teams, and then goes into the playoffs with the Seattle Thunderbirds and scored 28 points in 24 playoff games. Obviously, it is juniors. He is a player that is, aged out at this point. So you're expecting him to play really well last season, but it was nice to see him succeed. It was nice to see him score in bunches, and I'm excited to see what he's able to do in Wilkes-Barre. And if he plays in that prospects game, see what he's able to do against the Bruins prospects on September 17th.
One thing that people don't really take into effect too, or take into mind whenever we discuss junior stats, is just what that can do for the confidence of a player. Like, yeah, okay, especially in the Q. Yeah, okay, they're not playing against the greatest defense. They're playing against kids. I mean, especially as an overage year, they're playing against 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds who are, let's just tell it like it is, not aged into their game yet, are still trying to learn a lot. But what that can do for a player's mindset and confidence is, oh, I can do this. They look at their stat sheet and say, look at these numbers that I can put up. Now, you have to be realistic about the jump to different leagues, but you have high expectations for yourself, and you now have a new drive and confidence, which is an underestimated thing when it comes to talking about junior stats like that. While they are impressive and, he is older, that can have a lot of help in the mindset of his game going forward into camp and into the AHL. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But I think it's at least a confidence builder. You love to see high numbers regardless of the league, because at the same time, everyone in that league is your peer.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think the big thing we have to realize about Lukas Svejkovsky is he is a pure offensive talent. That's the way he skews as a prospect. So we're going to see him come in to Wilkes-Barre, and you'll have to see how his production is able to track in a higher league. We'll see where head coach J.D. Forrest ends up putting him down there, the AHL. I would love to see him on a line with, say, a guy like Nathan Legare, who needs to get back into that scoring mindset. I know Legare was touted as a guy with a really good shot, really good scoring instincts, and I'd like to see those two play off each other early in the season. But before we move on and talk about the opening of training camp, which the dates for that was announced late last week as well, I want to mention Owen Pickering really quickly. I'm excited to see what he looks like in game action. I'm hoping he plays in that game against the Boston Bruins on September 17th. I expect him to be at rookie camp September 15th to the 20th. So I'm excited to see more of him before the Pittsburgh Penguins ship him back off to Swift Current to play in the WHL next season.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to mention. I would have mentioned Owen Pickering because we don't really have any other defensive prospects aside from P.O. Joseph worth noting about. But I just don't know what his status is with everything. I don't know where he's going to be. I mean, the camp most likely, the game, who knows, and then who knows where he goes into regular training camp from there. He's just a question mark with those things. I'm still excited to see what he can do and what he looks like with this team and learning the system, but just uncertainty, that's all. What about where he's going to be, not uncertainty as a player.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, how far out people are, and Owen Pickering is several years out from being anywhere close to becoming an NHL regular, but I'm excited to see what the young talent is, and honestly, if he can make any improvements based on coming into developmental camp in June and then taking a couple months off, see what he's worked on and see if he plays any better, if he takes any of that instruction and shows a little bit more of impressive skill set at that rookie camp in September. So it's a very small jump to go from development camp to rookie camp, but I'm excited to see more of Owen Pickering because when you have a first round draft pick for the first time in 3 years, everybody's going to be excited to see what he's able to do every single chance. I mean, we track when Poulin's been at training camp, which I believe this will probably be his 4th year for Sam Poulin at Penguins training camp if he's invited. So that's the kind of stuff you look for and see how he performs and who he's performing alongside in those particular camps. I don't know if Pickering's going to stay around for Penguins camp. I would highly doubt it, but it would be nice to see if he plays well between September 15th and 20th, if he gets the nod to practice a little bit into the 22nd and a little bit further.
Right. I would assume he does maybe crack that lineup for the prospect camp just because, by God, we need defensemen. Who else are we going to throw out there?
Yeah, that's true. But also, I mean, you never know, especially with the fact that he is only, 18 years old, 19 years old. So he's very, especially as a defenseman, if you're not one of these top tier guys, a la, Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, you're probably not going to get your stride and break into the NHL till you're about 23, 24 years old. Hence where P.O. Joseph is currently at. But it's nice to get an early look at some of these guys, especially a guy like Owen Pickering.
Yeah, and actually, as I pulled up the our cap friendly and went to our in the system defensemen, we have 6 names there, and 2 of them are Pickering and P.O. Joseph.
Yeah,
and then there's a third who's Taylor Fadoon. So yeah, we really don't have defensemen in the system. So I would quite frankly assume Owen Pickering will be there. P.O. Joseph might even be there, and then tack on. Oh, I forget his name now, but we chose like 1 or 2 more defensemen in the draft. I would assume maybe they're there, and then maybe Joshua Maniscalco, who's in this list. Xavier Ouellet's 29. He's not going to be there.
Yeah, no, he's an
Sawyer
NHL vet.
Be very good, by the way. So him as well.
And the only other name that I do want to mention, he wasn't able to really participate back in June at development camp. I want to see if Zam Plant is able to get out there on the ice and get a look at him in a Pittsburgh Penguins practice uniform. I think that would be interesting because a lot of people have high hopes for him. A lot of people really like his tape. I know Danny Shirey of DK Pittsburgh Sports has written a couple pieces on there, so go check that out if you're more interested in Zam or Zam. I think he said Zam like Zamboni. So Zam Plant. Until I'm corrected, that's what I'm going to go with. But I should probably do a little bit more research into that. But before we move on and talk a little bit about early predictions for the NHL squad next season, we're going to predict the Penguins leaders very early on, just basically what we're thinking heading into the season, looking at the roster as it currently stands. The Penguins did announce the opening dates for training camp. The first practice will be on September 22nd. I should say the first on-ice practice will be on September 22nd, which is Mark Friedman days away from today. So we have 52 days until Penguins camp opens up, Horwat. What is one new player, before we move on, what is one new player into the organization that you're excited to see at Penguins camp? I mean, it could be Petrie, Smith, Paling even. Who are you excited to see at Penguins camp 52 days out as it stands right now?
I was just about to say, do we even have a new forward? I would have to go with Jeff Petrie just because we have to see what he still has. We know he's still a decent player, but he's now the highest paid defenseman on the team. That changes things up a little bit. So now suddenly you expect him to not play exactly like the highest paid player on the defensive core. We know Chris Letang is still there and is still going to be the number one for now. But you at least hope, much like Mike Matheson we were doing for a long time, we hope he can kind of live up to some of what he is making.
Yeah.
We hope he can, make it feasible, we can justify it. So I'm interested to see in what Jeff Petrie can do as a year older and, making how much exactly was it? 6.25 at the age of 34? We just have to hope for the best there. So I'm excited to see what he can do because he still has it from what it seems. And from all accounts of what people have said, that he can still cut it. It's just a matter of doing it now.
No shade to Ryan Paling, who's the only forward, but I'm going to the back end as well for my answer to this one. I'm really excited to see what Ty Smith brings because similar to what John Marino was heading into last season, great rookie year, really bad sophomore slump. What does he do in the third year? And especially because when you look around, especially Penguins Twitter, Penguins social media, even some of the pundits around the Pittsburgh Penguins as well, some people are saying, hey, he's the shoo-in for the lineup. Some people are saying, hey, he's going to fight for the lineup. And then there's other people that are saying he's going to start the season in Wilkes-Barre. They're going to let him go back and regain his footing. So I'm excited to see what Ty Smith brings to the table at training camp and where the Pittsburgh Penguins are kind of feeling out with him. Because obviously we talked to Neil Villapiano via text, a good friend of the show. He covers the Devils for the Devil State of Mind podcast. And he said, listen, if you put Ty Smith with a defensive defenseman and let him do what he does, which is start the transition game, great first pass, carry the puck up the ice, then he's going to be a very good addition to that blue line. So I'm interested to see, does he get paired up with a Chad Ruhwedel early in camp? Does he get paired up with Jan Ruda early in camp? I'm very excited to see what the Penguins think of Ty Smith from the jump, especially considering that not very many people can predict where he's going to be at the start of the season.
Yeah, he's a hard one to pin down. You just don't know because he does need to have that rebuilding season. He's in that John Marino spot. Like I put it to you whenever he got traded, I said, so we traded for a cheaper John Marino.
Yeah, I mean, it's oversimplifying it, but basically that's what the conversation we had.
It pretty much was. It was we traded John Marino for John Marino, subtracting a year and $4 million, which don't get me wrong, is perfectly fine. This does the job. It's just now a matter of finding the right rebuilding for his career and for his future, whether it be starting in the AHL or fighting for a spot on the third line, whatever works.
Yeah, and I also think that obviously part of the oversimplification is John Marino is much better defensively and Ty Smith is a little bit more offensively inclined. But yeah, two players in very similar situations and stages of their career. That is for sure. But we're going to take a quick break. When we return, early predictions for the Pittsburgh Penguins leaders in the 2022-23 season. Very early, mind you. It is August, but we'll talk about that right after the break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. We talked a lot about prospects in the early portion. We talked about training camp in the early portion of this episode. Let's talk a little bit about predictions because Horwat, it is August. All you can do is look forward. You can look back a little bit, but you really can't look at anything in the present day. So let's make way too early predictions for the Pittsburgh Penguins leaders for the 2022-23 NHL season. And let's start with penalty minutes because that's something that I look back on last season. I was kind of surprised because the Penguins leader in penalty minutes was Chris Letang, which that in and of itself is not surprising. But with only 49 penalty minutes, it feels a little low, doesn't it?
It does. I'm not used to that, but I'm not shocked at all that it was Chris Letang, though. Are we not?
I believe also the Penguins were one of the least penalized teams in the National Hockey League last season.
Uh-oh, everyone's going to be up in arms.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, I just remember people saying that, and I'm pretty sure that was correct. And it kind of goes along the lines with the fact that the Penguins league penalty minute guy was under 50 minutes.
Yeah, that does. But everyone can get up in arms about it. I don't care.
Yeah, whatever. But
you wish your team didn't get penalized that much. That's all.
Exactly. So, Horwat, who's your way too early prediction for who's going to lead the Pittsburgh Penguins in penalty minutes next year?
Quite honestly, I'm going to say Chris Letang again. I mean, the guy plays the most amount of time on the ice.
That's true.
And he doesn't have the hottest of heads.
I found this on the web.
Sorry, Siri's listening to me, apparently. He doesn't have the hottest of heads. That's Evgeny Malkin for sure. But I think Evgeny Malkin's really taught himself to reel it in. Whereas with age, Letang's kind of lost that, I think. I think Chris Letang has really kind of let referees hear it, let other players hear it, and not going after people, but really just kind of being a little rougher around the edges and taking those dumb penalties that we all get mad at him about. So
yeah,
I'm going to say it's going to be a little bit more of that, but you have to take the ugly with the good and know that Chris Letang can still outperform his penalty minutes.
Yeah, when I look at this, Letang's also a name that came up. I wouldn't say that he's kind of like gotten to this point. I think he's always been hyper competitive. I mean, that's just the way that it seems Chris Letang is as a human being. And when you get to be that kind of player, a hyper competitive player, and you play as much time as you do, and people take liberties against him because he is the best defenseman on the Pittsburgh Penguins, one of the best 3 players on the Pittsburgh Penguins, one of the best 10 defensemen in the National Hockey League. People are going to take their liberties. They're going to take their shots. And Chris Letang does retaliate, which is why he often finds himself high in this list of Penguins penalty minutes. But I'm going to go with Evgeny Malkin because I have very lofty expectations for, at the very least, the games played amount for Evgeny Malkin next season. And he has something to work towards. He's going for the Penguins franchise record, which he's only 40 penalty minutes away, as we've mentioned several times. So I'm going to say Evgeny Malkin leads the Pittsburgh Penguins when it comes to penalty minutes next season.
He's only 40 minutes back. We know he'll get to that, but it's a matter of time. Just both these guys, they just have their hot-headed nature and their competitive nature of sometimes going red mist. It happens, but we have to just hope they can outperform that.
Also, I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, but I'm pretty sure Evgeny Malkin finished in the top 10 in penalty minutes for the Pittsburgh Penguins, despite only playing in 41 games last season.
Oh, that checks out.
Yeah, it makes sense. So if he plays the entire season, I feel like I'm safe there with the Evgeny Malkin pick. But let's move over to something else and talk about assists. Last season, Chris Letang set a career high in assists and led the Pittsburgh Penguins in that category with 58. Who do you think, Horwat, leads the Pittsburgh Penguins in assists come next season?
It's going to go to Sidney Crosby, the playmaker himself, just because he's got to keep the game for himself changing. Keep changing the game for himself somehow, and I think it's going to be playmaking ability, finding guys like Rickard Rakell, hopefully, and Jake Gensel to find the back of the net. It's just the easy answer for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at Sidney Crosby as well, you see last season he didn't lead the Pittsburgh Penguins in assists, but you also think about the fact that he missed the early portion of the season dealing with an injury, came back for a couple games, went back out on COVID. Obviously, coming back from COVID takes a little bit longer to get your feet underneath you. So hopefully Sidney Crosby, knock on wood, can get off to a strong start the season right from game number 1, especially alongside Jake Gensel. And if that's the case, I see Crosby having a 100-point season this year. We saw so many players more than normal last season get to that 100-point plateau. Sidney Crosby, I believe, had 84 points, which was tied for the team lead, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But I think Crosby leads the Pittsburgh Penguins in assists. I would think that because of the Jeff Petrie signing, Chris Letang's going to hopefully get less playing time. It's going to take a little bit more of the load off of Chris Letang, but nothing's taking the load off of Sidney Crosby's shoulders. He is going to be the same guy year in and year out, even if Evgeny Malkin's healthy, even if they have a great third line. It's going to be Sidney Crosby getting the bulk of the minutes because he is just that guy. I see him reaching 100 points, and he doesn't reach 100 points without leading the Penguins in assists. So I agree, Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, that's just it. Sidney Crosby.
Let's go over to goals because Jake Gensel last year led the Pittsburgh Penguins in goals with his second career 40-goal season. But something that's interesting to me is when you look at Evgeny Malkin, if you see the fact that he played 41 games, which was exactly half a season, and he scored 42 points, he was on pace to tie the Penguins record in goals, the Penguins lead in goals, I should say, in 40 with Jake Gensel. And he was also on pace to tie the Penguins points lead at 84 with Crosby and Gensel. So I'm going to say Evgeny Malkin. He was on base for a 40-goal season last year. He has a full offseason to rehab without an injury. He has a full training camp to get ramped up with his legs, which he didn't have last season. I see Evgeny Malkin leading the Pittsburgh Penguins in goals next season.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think for Jake Gensel, it's not going to be where he lands, but with how many he lands. With how many goals does he exactly score? Is it over 40? Could it approach 50? I mean, he's coming off, what did you say, a 40-goal season. I think he can eclipse that again easy. And then just going from there, can he find a couple more? Does playing with Sidney Crosby and hopefully Rickard Rakell and even Brian Rust is still fine with that. Can they really help him jump to the next level? I mean, that was in 76 games played, those 40 goals. So, pretty close to 82, only missing a handful here or there. But getting to the next level, going into his prime years finally, he's going to start hitting those. This is your peak years. You have to take full advantage of them going into be 28, 27. This is the time. Having him hit 40, 45 to possibly, hopefully, maybe, you never know, 50. Have some fun. If Sidney Crosby wants it to happen, it will happen.
Especially if he plays, it doesn't matter who he plays with, but if he plays on a line with Rakell and Crosby, I think Jake Gensel is clearly the number one sniper on that line. Yeah. But if he plays with Russ, which we'll talk about with our weekly Pens poll coming up, if he plays with Russ is also a trigger man. So you obviously usually end up splitting the goals between the two. Gensel still gets the bulk majority, but Brian Rust is also somebody who's able to put it away. Whereas I think Rakell is somebody who, if he played on that line for a full season, would he score 20 goals? Yeah, probably. But I also think his vision and his passing ability leads to Jake Gensel getting a little bit more production when it comes to the goals as well.
Yeah, no, it totally does. I think they're going to find every way to get Gensel scoring this year.
And do I think Jake Gensel will score 40 goals again? Yes. I just think that's, like I said, at the outset of this episode, I have hefty goals for Evgeny Malkin heading into next season. Listen, there's been a lot of disrespect put on Evgeny Malkin's name. I've seen a lot of that over the past week. With that, plus I obviously wrote an article for it on, I believe, Friday for InsideThePenguins.com about, hey, a lot of people are doubting him. He's 36 years old, but this is the first offseason in 2.5 years, 3 years, that he didn't have to rehab a major injury, didn't have to rehab a surgery. And he's going to get a full training camp. I just see it as a year where Evgeny Malkin has a lot to prove. And usually when that happens, it turns out really well for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Right. I'm not knocking anything you said about it. I just feel that with his age, and sure, he's had his time to recover, you're still a little more fragile. I think he'll be fine. I just don't see 40 coming from it. I mean, it's possible. I get that was his pace last year.
Yeah.
But different season, new season, everyone's getting younger around him league-wise. And the Metro did not get easier per se.
It did not. But the only other thing that I will say about that is let's get him some consistent line mates.
Yeah, that'll help a lot too. That will help
he played with a lot. Zucker, Kapanen, Heinen, Rodriguez. The list goes on.
Russ maybe slips down there.
Rakell at times. I mean, he played with so many wingers in just 41 games. Yeah. So can we get the guy some consistent wing play? I understand that injuries plays a part in that, but at least one consistent winger would do the trick for Evgeny Malkin.
At least one.
At least one. But let's finish off this conversation talking about the points lead because that is the big one. Sidney Crosby and Jake Gensel tied for the lead for the Pittsburgh Penguins in points last season with 84 apiece. Who is going to lead the Pittsburgh Penguins in points? As it stands right now, August 1st of 2022, who do you believe is going to lead the Penguins in points when it's all said and done in May of 2023?
Going to go Sidney Crosby again. He's going to lead in assists, set up Jake Gensel a whole hell of a lot, but also find the back of the net a pretty good amount himself, because that's what he does. It won't not lead the team in scoring amount, but definitely finding the most points among this roster. Just, another casual season for Sidney Crosby leading the team in points. I mean, only Chris Kunitz has been the one outside of Crosby and Malkin in the last 16 years to do it.
Yeah, and I believe that was in the lockout shortened 2012-13 season.
Yeah, I think that's how that went. And Gensel, I guess you could say Jake Gensel most recently. I don't remember, but you could say Jake Gensel most recently stepped in there, but I mean, Sidney Crosby also had 84, so you have to do what you can. But I think it's just another run-of-the-mill season with Sidney Crosby leading this team in scoring, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I was trying to bring it up on the Penguins app. I know on the Pittsburgh Penguins website, you can go back and look at all the leaders of the past, year by year, but it's not available on the app right now. But
I'm currently flipping Hockey Reference to find another name, and so far I haven't. So
yeah, I also agree with you, though. It would be Sidney Crosby that's probably going to lead the Pittsburgh Penguins in points. I mean, the caveat in all of this is health, obviously, the entire conversation that we've had here. But when you look at Sidney Crosby, I said I believe he's going to reach the 100-point plateau once again. I said that I believe he's going to lead this team in assists. So, of course, I'm going to believe that he's going to lead this team in goals as well. I don't know if Jake Gensel is going to have the ability to hit 100 points this season. I think at some point in his career he reaches that. But I do still think that Sidney Crosby is the leader for the Pittsburgh Penguins in points once again. It would be the 12th time in his career that Sidney Crosby led the Pittsburgh Penguins in points. So does Jake Gensel score a 100-point season? I don't know. Maybe. But I still think even if he does, Sidney Crosby ends up with more points than him.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think he will. And from what I've seen so far, as I keep flipping back, it's only been Crosby and Malkin. That Kunitz thing may have been goals.
It probably was goals.
I mean,
now that I think of it.
Yeah, because he was second on that season. I did get back to that year. He was second on that year. So ever since Crosby broke into the league, because he was the rookie that led in 05-06 the team with 102 points to Sergei Gonchar's second at 58. It has been those two's show ever since they got here.
That's true.
And I just think that continues.
Yeah, it's a pretty safe bet. I think the odds on that bet would be pretty non-favorable. You probably have to lay a lot of chicken to get anything substantial back in return.
A little bit of scratch, yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a chalky pick, let's say that much. But let's finish this episode off with our weekly Pens poll. Obviously, we like to send it out on our Twitter page at Ice-Burgh Podcast every week. Get your reaction as the listeners to this show and the fans of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And last week we asked, which top 6 configuration would you most like to see? B, won with 63%, and this is the configuration for option B. It was Gensel, Crosby, Raquel, Zucker, Malkin, Rust. That is the most liked configuration based on our listeners, based on our followers. A got 28%, which is basically what it finished at last season. Gensel, Crosby, Rust, Zucker, Malkin, Raquel, and then only 9% for the third option, which was Zucker, Crosby, and Raquel, with Gensel, Malkin, and Rust as the second unit. Horwat, which of these configurations do you like heading into next season?
B. Ever since Raquel has gotten here, I've wanted him to play with Sidney Crosby, man.
Yes.
Just anything with that sounds good to me, except for maybe the option where Kapanen is sliding into this list somehow.
Yeah, I didn't even put Kapanen in this list because he doesn't deserve to be in this list as of right now. Maybe later in the season, but right now there's nobody that should be projecting him as a top 6 player.
Right, so I got to go with my option B, just because Raquel is. I want to see something new, something fresh. As much as it is fun to watch Crosby, Gensel, and Rust go at it and watch them just toy with defenses sometimes, something a little fresh. So, if you have to go back to Old Faithful, that's perfectly fine. I just don't see an issue with giving those 3 a shot early in the season, seeing what they can do, and having a lot of runway to still recover if you really need to. I think this team is good enough, at least in the first 2 lines, that if Rust is down a line, it's not going to change too much, and there will still be, it shouldn't hamper your win-loss record.
No,
if you have
it really shouldn't.
Rust down a line. So, I mean, let's say it does. Well, do it early so you have plenty of runway to work with here.
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. When I look at all of these options, the best line is Gensel, Crosby, Raquel, in my opinion. I mean, secondly would be Gensel, Crosby, Rust. Just because Gensel and Crosby together, if you get somebody competent on that right side, it's going to be a really, really good line. It's going to be clearly your top line, one of the best lines in all of hockey. But when I try to think of the best configuration, I'm one of the 9%. You know, what is going to work best for the Pittsburgh Penguins? I think that's option C. I think that's moving Jason Zucker up onto the top line with Crosby, letting him play with Raquel. That changes things up a little bit. But then giving Evgeny Malkin, somebody who, again, lofty expectations for me, might be a really bad look come May. Lofty expectations, though. If you put Gensel and Rust with Evgeny Malkin, the matchup that you're going to be able to create against opposing teams' second lines is completely unfair. Obviously, again, same as the last conversation, health is a massive factor. But Jason Zucker, in brief stints, has shown the ability to play exceptionally well with Sidney Crosby. Crosby just does that with players. Rickard Rakell, same thing. Small sample size, really good results. I understand that not many people are going to want to take Gensel and Crosby apart from each other, and that's fair. It's a pretty simple decision if you're Mike Sullivan. Hey, keep those two together. You're going to get success from that line. I think you're going to get success from that line anyway. It's Sidney Crosby.
Yeah.
If you put him with a guy like Zucker, you got a guy that's going to forecheck, back check, create havoc on the ice. And then you have Raquel, who has great handles, great hockey IQ, fantastic passing, and an underrated finishing ability, along with Sidney Crosby, who is one of the greatest players in the history of the game. And then you have that second line of Gensel, Malkin, Rust. I just really like that configuration. I think that's the best thing for the Penguins. Do I think we'll see it? Probably not. But I do think that that's the best thing for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
It's interesting. It's definitely along the lines of what I mentioned of changing things up a little.
Yeah.
That's just changing things up a lot. And I don't hate it because, again, like we've mentioned, Sidney Crosby can make anyone pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The fun thing about your option as well here is we've seen Crosby Zucker have success before. Short sample size, but we've seen it before. We've seen Crosby and Raquel have success before. Short sample size again, but still we've seen it. And then let's not forget when Crosby was out for a long time and Malkin's first line center wings were Rust and Gensel, were they not? At least Jay Gensel. I mean, we can remember that's who he was playing with when he got hurt before the bubble. And Rust, we already know Malkin and Rust have something already there. So like everyone in this configuration has had success with each other anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just the most question marky thing is the first line of Zucker and Raquel being wings together for the first time ever. But again, something new, something you work on in practice, do it early in the season. You have runway to adjust.
Yeah, and here's the other thing with that. Evgeny Malkin at his age, I do have lofty expectations. I think he's going to have a great season. When you compare Malkin versus Crosby on who can get the better out of their wings and do more for the people on the other sides of them, the answer is Sidney Crosby.
Yeah.
And of these wing sets, which set of wings needs more help when it comes to getting the most out of their ability? Zucker and Raquel.
Yeah.
Jake Gensel can drive play. We know this. Brian Rust at times can drive play. We know this. Rust and Gensel together can drive play. So put Malkin in the middle of that and watch it succeed. That's all I'm saying. I know it's not the most liked opinion, clearly only 9% of the vote. But I think that is what's best for the Pittsburgh Penguins in this scenario. And obviously, we're going to see how it all plays out in 52 days in day one of training camp and where these players end up starting in the starting lineups and the line rushes. But I do think that that's a configuration that even if they don't start with, I think it would work really well if they get to at some point this season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down for switching everything up. Do what you got to do.
Yeah, of course. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast. We'll be back on Thursday with more discussions. It is August. It is the dead days of summer for the NHL. But with World Juniors coming up, maybe we'll do a little bit of coverage on that because hockey is hockey and World Juniors is some of the best hockey that one could watch. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys on Thursday. Have a great week, Pens fans.